So you watched the first part on a few elements, and now I want to cover a couple of more. So sound devices are really interesting. Ignore that page number, by the way. We don't have a textbook anymore, which is kind of cool. The first one's alliteration, and it's the repetition of consonant sounds. Think of tongue twisters. So when I show you this particular alliteration from this limerick, think about what consonant sounds are repeated besides the P. Assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds. Cacophony is the wrenching together of sounds that give a discordant effect. Basically, it doesn't roll off the tongue. And this helps to create a tone that's very strong, severe, and serious. Whereas euphony is very musical because it's pleasing sounds being put together. And so that has a more positive tone that the poem feels positive. It's a positive quality. So think about how sound devices work. Onomatopoeia, for example, is the sound that mimics what we hear in reality, like pop or snap or bang. And that kind of adds some whimsy to the tone of the poem. It brings life to it through the sounds it's trying to mimic. So as I had said, sound devices create a certain feeling to a poem. And you want to look for repeated letters to see the sounds that are being repeated. That's a good trick to figure out what sound device is being used. Is this alliteration? Is this assonance? Is this euphony? And what is it doing to the poem's tone? If we look at this line from Edgar Allan Poe's The Bells, think about what sounds are being repeated and how you would describe the ringing of these kinds of bells. Are they nice little jingle bells, or are they kind of different kind of bell? And what that does to the feeling of the line of the poem. Another aspect I want you to know is rhythm and meter. So if I look at this nursery rhyme again, there's no other way to read it. There's a certain way that all of us are going to read these lines, and it's going to sound like a little song. And that's because it has a specific rhythm and meter. So rhythm is a pattern of accented and unaccented sounds. So in the English language, for instance, we have natural patterns of speech. Have you ever heard someone say, "Kissimmee? I'm going to Kissimmee." And we kind of laugh because we know we pronounce it Kissimmee, which means the accent of the word is on the middle part, Kissimmee, not the beginning, Kissimmee. That kind of sounds kind of funny. So when we look at the pattern of where the accents fall in normal patterns of speech in English, we can look at the rhythm of a word. So my name is an iamb, and that's because the hard part of this syllable is on the second one. So my name is 2 syllables, Nicole, and I emphasize the last part of my name, Nicole. Whereas a trochee sounds more like the name Tony, like Tony, Tony. It's harder on the first part. Anapaests are, if you can hear the words Al Capone, Al Capone, Al Capone, it's a certain rhythm, da-da-da. And again, it's a tripling effect, whereas a dactyl is the opposite. It's harder on the first part of the 3 syllables of the word. Christopher, Christopher, da, 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 da. And so we look at this when poets use rhythm, if they do, they are creating song-like quality to the poem. And that also affects tone. So we can measure this when they repeat a certain accent and unaccented pattern. For example, this is from Robert Frost's poem, and he uses iambic tetrameter. Basically, he repeats an iamb, unaccented and then accented, 4 times. So you can see that here. This is unaccented and this is accented. So the way I would read this is, whose woods these are, I think, I know. And the line ends pretty hard. We'll have some practice in class about this, but I did want to point this out to you because we may encounter this in some of the poetry we might read. So these are called metrical feet, and it has to do with the number of times a certain accented pattern is repeated. So in this case, it's 4 times, which is tetrameter. And you can actually click on that. I'm not going to click on this link, but you can even look at Stopping by Woods on a snowy evening, and you can read, listen to the recording of Robert Frost reading the poem, and you can hear him in the way that he reads it with that rhythm. So scansion is basically trying to figure out where all these accents and unaccented marks are. And we may not do this in class, and we might, depends on the poem I choose. So I want you to just kind of understand what scansion is. We're just trying to figure out the rhythm of the poem. So that's what it would look like. And we'll have practice. If I choose to do this in class, we will have practice on this. So the reason why I'm teaching this to you is because, I want you to kind of have a greater respect for poets. People like William Shakespeare wrote in specific meter and rhythm, and he had to think about which words in English worked to make that rhythm. So he couldn't just choose any old words. He had to pick words that had certain accents and unaccented marks on English to fit them in a certain pattern. Another element that I really want you to know is figurative language, or also known as figures of speech. And these are some of the terms and the definitions and some examples. And I'm not going to read them. I just want you to kind of pause the video and take note of all of this in your notes. But I do want you to know what they are. We will be seeing these in the poems we read. They're exploited very often with poets. And again, ignore the page numbers. We don't have a textbook anymore. I totally forgot to take these out. But I do want you to know about symbol and irony. Symbol is when they take some kind of object and they start talking about it in a way that's no longer about that object. It represents something else. It could be an object that represents an abstract idea. So think about if there's any symbols in the poem, and we can talk about it. And irony is a disparity between what is said and what is meant. So it illuminates a point, and it also is meant sometimes to confuse the reader's emotion. So irony is, verbal irony is used in poetry sometimes to do that. It has to do with tone, and also sometimes with theme. So if you want more helpful links, I can certainly give you this PowerPoint as well. You just have to ask me for it, and I can send it to you so you can actually click on the links. But I do think that when we look at poetry, you might have a better appreciation for the writers and what they're trying to do with this particular art form and expression. So, when we're talking about war, or we're talking about certain subjects, sometimes poetry is what people turn to sort of express the feelings and emotions behind these situations. So I really appreciate this, that you watched it. And if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks for watching.